Hello, my name is Marvin Lockett, and I am doing a crisis, sexual assault crisis in the Department of Defense. And as you can see, we do have a crisis within the Department of Defense, which comprises of quite a few individuals that help accomplish missions around the globe. And this recording is to help address the crisis, talk about some of the key points and concerns, recommendations for the future, and we'll be closed out with a summary of the lesson being given on the PowerPoint. As you can see, the Department of Defense was established in September 1947, and it consists of four different branches. Now, mind you, you see the crest of the Department of Defense of the United States of America, and it is actually something different than most organizations. People think about businesses and money lost and impacts to revenue. It's a little bit different when it comes to a crisis, when it comes to the Department of Defense. We used to have a fifth branch of the Department of Defense, which was the Coast Guard. And now the Coast Guard actually belongs to the Homeland Defense. So they are no longer part of the Department of Defense, but the Homeland Security, and thus has been separated to leaving us with our four branches. So the mission of the Department of Defense is to provide the military forces needed to deter war and to protect the security of our country. The department's headquarters is at the Pentagon. The Pentagon is actually located at, some call it Crystal City, but it's over in Arlington, Virginia, where if you actually drive up the major highway into the, I guess you would call it the Beltway, you would run right into the Pentagon, and it is exactly what it says, the Pentagon, five sides. That is where all the higher leadership of our Department of Defense sits. You're talking about the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of Defense, all the Chiefs of Staffs of each one of the service, whether that be Army, Navy, Marines, or Air Force. And then every staff and civilian needed to run the Department of Defense so that we can manage each one of the four different elements. So, first thing, of course, because we're still giving you a background of the Department of Defense, because remember, that's the hierarchy, and then it has its four branches. So, the oldest of all, of course, is the Army. And if you can tell, it does have a plethora of people to support its mission, uh, which I will discuss in the next slide. You have 476,000 active duty. Now, these are just rough estimates because understand that the numbers of each one of the services goes up and down based off of uh, retirements and a death of a member, or people just getting out, ending their term of service, ETS as they call it. So these numbers go up and down based off of those different type of recruiting of new members and attrition of the members that are already in. So you're looking at 343,000 National Guard, 199 reserves, and then 330 Army civilians that support the mission for the Army. And the Army's mission in the Department of Defense, as a branch of the armed forces, the mission of the U.S. Army is to fight and win our nation's wars by providing prompt, sustained land dominance across the full range of military operations and the spectrum of conflict in support of combatant commanders. Now, I am a veteran of the Army and spent 20 years and 15 days. So I really fully understand this mission set of what has to happen for the Army to accomplish its portion of the Department of Defense goals when defending our country and its interests. But that is not the only force that we have, or actually branch as we call them. You have the Navy. Now the Navy is a little bit, it's big, but it's a little bit smaller and capable of doing other things that some of the services cannot do. So you have 336,978 active duty, 101,583 reserve, and 200,000 civilians. Now, as you know, the Navy is what wins our wars off land and on land as well. They do have service members like canine handlers for EOD and other type of things like Navy SEALs, their special operations. And if you compare a Navy SEAL, you can talk about the Army's special forces. Those are the different ones who are doing operations that are, I won't say off the books, but more strategic strikes against certain things to help our mission. But the Navy's mission is to maintain, train, and equip combat ready naval forces capable of winning wars and deterring aggression and maintaining freedom of the seas. Statement echoes the fact that the Navy acknowledges that America is not immune to its external threats in the sea. All right, so that is the Navy and its mission and how it fits into the Department of Defense. Then you have the Marines, 186,000 active duty, 38,500 reservists, and 35,000 civilians that ensure that the Marines meet their piece of the pie when it comes to mission readiness of the Department of Defense. And of course, they have their mission, which is America's Expeditionary Force in readiness since 1775. The U.S. Marines are forward deployed to win our nation's battles swiftly and aggressively in times of crisis. We fight on land, sea, and air, as well as provided forces and detachments to naval ships and ground operations. Now, what's unique about the Marines and their mindset within the Department of Defense with their mission is there is truly a Department of the Navy, and then the Marines are a portion of that. So they don't really have their own department, but we do consider them a branch because of their size and mission set. But generally, they fall under that Department of the Navy. I would not talk to a Marine about that and say that because they could get pretty offended based off of their pride of what they have done and what they do. And they are quick to tell you we're Marines and we're not Navy. And that is very true. And they have very rich culture and history behind that. Then, of course, we head on to the fourth branch, which is the Air Force. And they have 321,444 active duty members, 105,700 Air Guard, 69,200 reserves, and 141,880 civilians to help support the mission that they have. Now, of course, they do have special forces or spec ops, they call them PJs, that can do the same things as special forces, long range reconnaissance that's in the Marines or the Navy SEALs. Their mission set of the United States Air Force is to fly, fight, and win in air, space, and cyberspace. Our rich history and our vision guide our airmen as we pursue our mission with excellence and the integrity to become leaders, innovators, and warriors. Now, the Air Force branched off of the Army as the Air Army Corps. And when they branched off, they created, of course, the Air Force. And now, most of you would know that the mission set now is also going to split between the Air Force and the Space Force, that is now going to be the new fifth branch of the Department of Defense. But that is still ongoing and newly approved, so we still have time. Thus, they're not going to be represented in this slide. So, some other things that we need to know about these four branches that fall under the Department of Defense, because I'm still giving you a background of this organization that we're about to talk about when it comes to what crisis they're going through, is that they have locations around the globe. This organization is so robust in their area of operations that things that happened are not just going to occur in an isolated situation in one area. And seeming that we say we're big, but however, most of these different subcultures within the military, meaning they're like military occupational specialties and everything else, it's rather small. So everybody tends to know everybody, which can affect readiness when somebody goes through a portion of the crisis in which we're going to talk about. But as you can see, this is just a few listed Army bases and installations given per country and territory. Thus, we've had added some actual places in which we are now to more or less expand our reach so that we can head to any area of the world in moments' notice to protect the America's interests and its allies. So, as you know, you see up at Alaska, because you have the Bering Strait between that and Russia, of course, we have assets there. In Hawaii, we have assets all over this map so that we can do what we have to do and accomplish our mission based off of what is prescribed of us by the Department of Defense and its leadership, and of course, the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States. So that is the background of the Department of Defense and its four branches: the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. And Space Force when they come, but like I said, that's fairly new. So let's talk about the crisis that is needing to be addressed now. So here's the crisis that is ongoing today, and it has been going on for quite some time. And let me orient you, because I'll talk about the crisis while you look at the actual image, Exhibit 2 of the active duty estimated biennial prevalence compared to annual reporting of sexual assaults. So if you go ahead and look at it, on the left side you have the number of service members, and then on the bottom you have the fiscal year. Now the fiscal year for the military goes from October to the end of September, and that counts as a year. They don't go off physical year, which would be January 1 to December 31st. And there's reasons for that, but that's what that FY means on the bottom. Now you see we've been tracking numbers for quite some time. So the crisis really didn't start here, especially in FY 2012. The crisis really started back in, I would say, Tailhook, and this was before in the 90s, and we had different things going on at the Air Force Academy, and we had also things going on with the Army. So every branch has had their situations in the timeline that built up to creating the SAPRO, Sexual Assault Prevention Response Office, in 2005. In 2005, they were charged with attempting to figure out a way to prevent these type of crimes from occurring within our ranks, which ultimately means within our ranks and outside our ranks, because it's not always a green on green, as we call it. sometimes there's outside influences that occur that create these problems. So if you look at the numbers when we really kind of got hot into understanding what's going on, you have 2,228 sexual assaults in FY12. And then if you focus up, you'll see the different percentages: 6.1 women or 1.2 when it came to men. So as you see that steady climb and it continues to have a rise, and even in FY20, it looks like we're on track to even surpass the 6,236 sexual assaults we have now, and at the rate of 6.2% women and 0.7 men. And now, mind you, some of these reports they come in different. Some people never report, some people do report, and we're trying to drum down on that in the Department of Defense and trying to figure out how we can get the prevalence line, what you see at the top. That's the prevalence line of sexual assault. We're trying to figure out how we can get prevalence down when it comes to sexual assault and reports up. And that way we can address the problems without them going on their own, which could hinder them accomplishing their mission and take and decrease their productivity, which also decreases the organization's productivity. But this whole graph right here shows the actual crisis we're in. Even though we are large numbers, this is way too many sexual assaults that should be occurring within our ranks that could influence our mission set. So some of the things that started the crisis that were recent that pushed us to discuss more things and create more programs was things like the Invisible War. So when the Invisible War came out, military leaders were, I'm not going to say forced, but recommended that they watch this documentary on individuals that had not got proper investigations and or never reported, and then told their experiences on why they didn't report. Now, as you can see, it says one of the most shocking cover-ups in history. It is somewhat of a one-sided view, but it really opens your eyes to what needs to happen. And it opened a lot of leaders' eyes when this came out, because I don't think people thought about the impacts that it would have on our organization and the people around it that support us and trust us daily. And as you can see, there's actually two of our survivors, or victims as we call it per regulation, because if you we have victims or crime, that would be what they call, but some people call survivors, as I survived this crime. But one of the ones I want to focus on is Jared Wright right there. Jared Wright got sexually assaulted because, generally we always hear about females, but we have male victims too. And he got sexually assaulted while downrange in Iraq through the hazing and everything else, where his platoon in leadership sexually assaulted him digitally and penetrated different parts of his body. So, yeah, we have a crisis and we identify that, and I think the leaders do as well. So, that Invisible War and all of these different things started popping out. And guess what happened? We started having some congressional hearings, because we are America's asset to win wars if needs be and protect our country. And how do we protect our country if you cannot protect the people who protect it? So, what happened was our leadership, General Ordinero, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and all the Chief of Staffs of the different branches were called to the table to discuss the way ahead on how we're going to protect our people. Now, some of the key individuals that was in the Congress was Senator McCaskill, Gillibrand, and things like that, who were really smacking down hard on the commanders, letting them know, what are you going to do to protect your people? And if you can't do it, we will find someone who can. So this created a lot of different situations and programs that would come forward in the future. Some of the key points that came out at congressional meeting was service members need options for reporting. Yes, we need options for reporting and how to address that they have someone to come to. Prevention of sexual violence, how do we create this and what should we look for to prevent it? System and individual advocacy, making sure we have individuals trained up to provide support and resources to those who were sexually assaulted to ensure there's empathy that is being bestowed and respect and dignity on those victims. Leadership actions and behaviors upon receipt of a sexual assault, not hiding things and directing resources like CID, which is the Criminal Investigation Detachment, and things like that to help them in medical services. And then, of course, we have challenges across the spectrum of operations, whether that be deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, or any other location, or if it's here, home side within the continental or OCONUS of the United States of America. So there's a lot of challenges on trying to maintain all of these, but generally that's why we create policies, regulations, so that people can understand and read what we should do, what is right. Then, of course, there was an organizational message that came down from our leaders, and it kind of rounded everything up. The way forward, the Department of Defense to address sexual assaults holistically with a focus on prevention, addressing problematic culture, preparing leaders at all levels, and promoting new and existing reporting options. This year's reports finds that no ongoing policy development programs and activities are appropriately targeted to address key areas impacting sexual assault prevention and response. So when you think about that, that's what put a lot of the primary military education out there to say, hey, how are we going to get after leaders and make sure they know what right looks like? How about our victim advocates, making them professionals? How do we talk to our soldiers and get them on board and change their perceptions? And so that is the message we actually got from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense to make sure we can address this type of crisis within our ranks. But then, of course, here's some of the recommendations because we had some issues that stem from this, like recruiting. Recruiting was on an all time low, and it still is today because of the effects of the different things going on when it comes to sexual assault within our ranks. Families are losing trust, so we have to rebuild trust in our society now so that they let their loved ones come forward and serve their country and do those things that we need them to do to protect us in the future and beyond. Leadership engagement is a major problem. We have to get leaders to want to step up and say something. If they see something, they identify it as a problem, they feel responsible for solving it, they figure out how they want to solve it, and then they solve it and take action, intervene, and try to prevent these from occurring in the future. And then, of course, establish programs. We have a program called the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response that has training and education for first responders to ensure we help out the victims and hold people accountable of their behaviors and actions that are alleged offenders or offenders. And we need to make sure those programs are pushed and individuals know exactly what's going on with those. However, with those recommendations, we had a lot of stuff that needs to occur. We need to get rid of some of those institutional practices that promote early warning signs that could progress down into sexual harassment and or sexual assault. And to do that, we have to get rid of some of those, as I call, old relic type attitudes and behaviors that could be sexist in nature that could stem some of these things from occurring. Now, there's not just female victims, there are victims. There means male and female. And just by pure numbers of research from the Pew Institute or RAINN and things like that, we are better understanding that we need to address this holistically when it comes to all genders and not just one. But in conclusion, there are a lot of things that I identified within this PowerPoint. We have to understand the effects and impacts that a sexual assault has on an organization such as the Department of Defense and its 4 branches. The individuals in there come to our organization to serve their country and to gain a trade or certification or qualification. It is up to our organization as leaders and as citizens of the United States of America to uphold what we do on a daily basis, and that is fight for those who cannot fight for themselves at times. And sexual assault and sexual harassment or sexual violence altogether does not fit into the way of life of the Department of Defense and the four branches. It takes away from our core values of each one of the branches and minimizes all the good things that our organization does on a daily basis for this country. So we need to step up and engage wrongful behaviors. We need to change the past to make the future look brighter. And that way we can hopefully deter and defeat acts of sexual violence within our organization. But you have to do that with not just sexual harassment, sexual assault. You have to do that with early warning signs, inappropriate jokes, things like that. Uh, Inappropriate relationships that might occur due to many reasons within the military. And if we attack those type of things to make it more of a healthy work environment where people enjoy coming to work and love to be around their fellow coworkers, we will be successful in ensuring that we can accomplish our commander-in-chief's mission to protect this country. So I will say that this is not going to be a easily won fight due to the different cultures, beliefs, values that constantly rotate within the United States Department of Defense. Ongoing recruiting means new people. Also, you have people coming from the outside that possibly experienced sexual violence already. So therefore now we have to help and assist those individuals in getting through what they need to so that they can become productive members of the organization. I hope you enjoyed my crisis PowerPoint video and look forward to any type of feedback that you are willing to give me. Have a great day, and that concludes my PowerPoint.